It's a slightly different feel to Question Time tonight. As you can see, we are at 8 o'clock on BBC One live, and we will be on in prime time throughout the general election campaign. Our audience here has lots of questions for our panel. For example, should 18-year-olds do national service? Can the NHS be improved without raising taxes? And will any party reduce the number of people coming to live here in the UK? We are in Epsom in Surrey, a town famous for its salts and its horse racing. It's also been solidly Conservative turf since the 70s. But our audience here reflects, as always, the electoral picture across the country. Welcome to Question Time. Tonight's panel, as always, a wide range of views. From the Conservatives, we have Damien Hinds, who had a number of ministerial roles and is currently Schools Minister. His party goes into this election defending its record of 14 years in power and what was an 80-seat majority won at the last general election. Labour's Wes Streeting is the Shadow Secretary for Health and Social Care and is one of his party's most senior voices. Labour's been ahead in the polls for the last 2 years and hopes this will translate into an election win in July. Nigel Farage is co-founder and honorary president of Reform UK. It used to be the Brexit Party and has a sustained polling average of around 11%. He launched Reform's campaign in Dover this week on the issue of immigration. The Right Reverend Bishop Rose Hudson-Wilkin is the Bishop of Dover. At 18, she moved here from Jamaica. By her early 30s, she was ordained a priest and then became chaplain to the Queen, led prayers at Harry and Meghan's wedding, and last year took part in the coronation. And Piers Morgan is a TV presenter and journalist. Previously, he was editor of the News of the World, followed by a long stint at the Daily Mirror. Earlier this year, he took his nightly interview-based TV show off Talk TV and onto YouTube. Good evening, welcome to our panellists, welcome to our audience here, welcome to you at home. And just to let you know that over the next 5 weeks of the general election campaign, we will have a range of political parties on the programme from right across the UK. And I just want to say that there are 5 of you on this panel tonight. Sometimes we have 4, sometimes we have 5. And I'd ask you to be reasonably brief so that, A, you can all get a word in, and crucially, the audience can ask their questions. We absolutely want that. So, without further ado, let's take our first question from Anna Halliday.
Is the idea of bringing back national service anything more than a political stunt?
So, under new Conservative plans, British teenagers, 18-year-olds, would either take a year working for the military in some shape or form, or 1 weekend a month do some form of community service. So, what have we got? We've got the former Chief of Naval Staff saying it's bonkers. We've got the former Chief of General Staff saying it's electoral opportunism. Is it anything more than a political stunt?
And you've got an awful lot of people emailing me saying they think it's a brilliant idea. And it's a brilliant idea because it's going to widen opportunities for young people in this country. It's going to introduce them to ways of learning new skills, meeting people from different backgrounds that they otherwise wouldn't come into contact with, help prepare them for the workplace, and overall give us a more cohesive society. And look, it's called national service, but it's a modern form of national service. Yes, there is an element. 30,000 people would get to go on a military placement. That is obviously going to be extremely competitive to get into fields like...
But if the military aren't welcoming it, how's that going to go down?
To get into fields like cyber and logistics. 30,000 people to do that for a year. And some of those, I'm sure, then will go on to become reservists in some of those key fields in which we need people to be working full-time in industry but be reservists for the army when they are called to do so. And that is something which is a core part of the army's and the other services strategy.
So why? So hang on, Dave. Wait a minute. Why is it then you've got very senior people in the military saying this is just nuts?
Well, look, different people. We're about to find out. I think different people, right-thinking people, can have different views on the same subject. I think this is a very good. It's a very good proposition, and people I've heard from think so too. I think it's really, really important though that you don't just let it hang on the military aspect, because that is the minority.
No, I did explain.
For most people, most 18-year-olds, it's 1 weekend a month for a course of a year doing volunteering, supporting core services like the RNLI, helping with ambulances, helping with delivering prescriptions, all sorts of things that we might do to help others in our society, and
James cleverly suggested
develop our skills and character.
James cleverly suggested their volunteering might include being an on-call firefighter. I mean,
I think the point is that I think the point is that in a lot of services, like in the police, for example, there are already special constables. There are already ways of becoming involved without actually becoming the frontline professional in that field.
Wes.
So last 9 years I've been president of my local Air Cadets, and it's incredible the opportunities they provide to young people, and not just the middle-class kids in my area, but working-class kids, opportunities to volunteer, to learn new things like shooting, go on outdoor activities, to fly aircraft. It's incredible. And if this pledge was about more opportunities for young people, broader range of opportunities, then I think we could welcome it and say, well, what have you been doing for the last 14 years, closing youth services and opportunities, and why have you only just woken up to this now? What this was really about was the Prime Minister hoping to talk about anything other than the damage they've done to the economy, the state of the NHS, the fact we've let prisoners out of prison early because they're full, and told police not to arrest dangerous criminals because the prisons are full. It is anything to avoid talking about the core issues facing our country and the responsibility your party bears for all of it. And the final thing I'd just say is on this concept of service. This Prime Minister and your party, Damien, are in no position whatsoever to lecture anyone else about service to the country. And this generation of young people, who I think the Prime Minister was implying were somehow feckless and in need of these opportunities for discipline, this is a generation of young people who've made more of a sacrifice than my generation and people around my age have ever made, because it was their education, their well-being, their childhood that was sacrificed during the pandemic for good reason. But the first time in my lifetime and recent history where we've said to young people, you need to make sacrifices to protect us as adults. We owe this generation in terms of their educational recovery, in terms of their education and their well-being and their mental health and well-being, and we owe it to them to make sure that when they think about their future, we put the wind in their sails, they can aim high, dream big, not be lectured by a Prime Minister with an abysmal record of failure.
Rose.
I want to say that I don't belong to a political party, so I'm not saying what I'm saying to do with anything political in terms of party-wise. But is this a backdoor conscription? I don't know. I hope it is not going to be. We already have things like the Duke of Edinburgh Awards, the Prince's Trust, a number of young people who I've met in inner city places who have said, because of the Prince's Trust or because of this organisation, I've been able to do that. The Archbishop of Canterbury just launched something recently called The Difference, where we're encouraging young people to be curious, to be present, and to reimagine the kind of society that they want to live in, a society where we don't just put some people on the scrap heap, but where we can stand together and be compassionate towards the community of which we belong. So if it is a program that is going to do that, then I want to see us actually engaging with young people. Don't say that they're too young and pay them less and treat them as if they're not of worth. So I hope whatever it is that we put on the table is something that says to young people that they're of value and of worth.
Well, I can see some young people, if I might describe that way, with your hands up. I don't know, I can't tell how old you are, but yes, the woman there, yes, with dark hair.
Regarding national military service, I heard very mixed results from people. Some people think it's great because it does contribute to the country, and some people think it's horrible because when thinking about studies and everything, it's just another responsibility. However, there are still people who do think it is good. So, for example, if Labour did come into power, could there be an alternative to it where it is still contributing to the country, but it's also not mandatory? Or maybe it's like an EPQ where you also have another qualification.
OK, I'll come back to that. Yes, you've with glasses on there, yeah.
Yes. As an 18-year-old myself, I find myself quite busy on day-to-day revision, DFE awards, for example. I feel like everyone my age has a job. So saying it's preparing you for the workplace is quite a leap, in my opinion.
OK, so you wouldn't welcome it?
No, I would not.
OK. Man here in the pink T-shirt.
Yeah, I just don't know what planet Rishi Sunak is on. I think he's just so distant and removed from, I guess, what ordinary people experience. I mean, how on earth does he think it's going to be enforced? Because swathes of the population just won't do it. It's just completely ill thought through and just unrealistic. I think the guy, it's just a last ditch attempt to try and gather some popular support. And I think it's just ridiculous.
Piers?
I don't agree, actually. I rather like the idea. I'm not sure about the current plans for it. I don't think it's been very well thought through. But there's a strange situation going on with young people at the moment, where there's a kind of epidemic of anxiety, depression, even suicide. And it's been exacerbated by the pandemic and this extraordinary period where they were locked away, couldn't see their friends. And I think giving them something which gives them a regular sense of purpose, and I'm talking mainly about the vast body of people, the 700,000 or so who would do just community service, I think it would give them a sense of responsibility, a purpose, and a sense of duty. And I think all those things are perfectly good things for young people to learn. Where it's been tried around the world, it's been very successful. People have enjoyed it, and they've come out better people. But what about the nation's service to our 18-year-olds? What about our sense of duty to them and what they've been through? And I'm picking up on what Wes said. This is a generation who lost years, the best years of their life. They were banned from going to parties by people who then had a series of illicit parties themselves. Absolutely. In the heart of government. These are people who now can't afford to rent because it's too expensive. They can't afford to buy a home. They can't afford to buy food. They can't even afford to go to the pub. They face punitive tuition fees for decades if they get to higher education. They probably won't ever earn as much money as their parents. They can't see doctors. They can't see dentists. They can't go to A&E without a 15-hour wait. They can't even go to the sea and have a swim without being covered in sewage. And this is what we've given this generation. So when we talk about national service and them doing their duty to their country, why don't we start with a bit of service to them and showing them a bit of duty to safeguard their future?
Nigel?
It's not a serious policy. It's focus group, isn't it? Get a group of potential Conservative voters. The chairman says, who supports national service? What a good idea. Jolly good, let's go with it. It's not a serious policy. It would only apply to 1 in 36 young people. 1 in 36 youngsters would get any form of military training. The rest would be asked to do 25 hours in a year of voluntary service, but it's not compulsory.
25 days, I think it is.
It's not compulsory, and there are no sanctions. Where I do agree is where a young generation have been damaged, but Piers, both you and you, Wes, you both supported lockdown after lockdown. I think we've all got to acknowledge now that it was a terrible mistake. And also, it couldn't be administered.
Sorry, are you saying the entire concept of lockdown was a mistake, or are you saying for young people...
I think the second and third lockdowns were catastrophic, and particularly for the young in this country. Absolutely catastrophic, and even the very young, too, in terms of their development. It was, we'll look back on it, as one of the worst historical mistakes of our lifetime. But I do think one thing. When this government came into office, there were 100,000 people in the British Army. It's now 73,000. Recruitment is absolutely terrible. Morale is bad. What we should be encouraging are 30,000 young people not to do training for a year. Let's get 30,000 young people to actually join the army, join it as a profession. Let's start to build our forces back up again. And, you know, a lot of this does, I mean, at the end of the day, many of these things do come down to money. But this government is spending less on defence than the last Labour government was in its last year. Now, there are some promises around from both parties to up defence spending, and I think in the wake of living in a very dangerous world, with the need to give more of our young people skills and training, we're going to have to think seriously about spending more money on defence in the next 5 years.
Nigel, since we've got you on, obviously we're having Reform on, as we're having other parties on during the election campaign, and I think it's fair to say you've appeared on virtually every media outlet this week, which has attracted some criticism because you're not actually standing for election.
No.
So why are then you the person who's fronting the campaign?
Don't ask me.
I'm asking you.
I'm not. Well, you invited me on. I mean, I don't know why you did.
Well,
but, I mean,
we actually asked for Lee Anderson, but anyway, he wasn't going to come on. But anyway, let's put that to one side. But many people are asking, why are you fronting the campaign when you are not standing for election?
Well, I had a choice. I mean, I had planned to stand in the election. I planned to have a 6-month run at it, but a 6-week run at it, virtually impossible.
OK, that's why you're not standing for election. Why are you fronting the campaign?
I'm not fronting the campaign. Richard Tice is the leader. He's fronting the campaign.
OK, but you've been interviewed by everyone under the sun this week.
He led the press conference today. I was there. in a supporting role. But am I going to go around the country and challenge what I think are some of the nonsenses? I think this general election campaign is so boring that Lord Lucan is on the front page of a Daily Mail today.
All right. Well, you might find it boring, but lots of people here want to ask questions, so
Well,
let's hear from someone
sorry,
there.
but it
It's
is.
the woman there in the purple jacket. Yes.
Thank you. Well, I was going to ask a question to Damien, actually, about national service, and isn't it a bit of a gimmick to try and plug the deficit in public services that your party has actually created? But that's been gazumped, actually, by Nigel. So, if I can, be very cheeky and just say to Nigel, is the reason that you're not standing because the last 7 attempts that you did try to stand, you didn't get selected? I'm sure that's not the case, but
Well, let me tell
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, I stood.
Yes,
I stood.
he's bottled it.
Piers,
bottled it.
You've never had the bottle to stand.
You
ever
bottled
in
it,
your
mate.
career.
I'm not a politician.
You've stood. No one.
I'm not a politician.
Well, you're not even a TV.
You bottled it.
But you're now prepared.
You're here pretending to represent a party. You're not even prepared to represent it.
Stop.
Look.
Could you please answer the question?
Yes, I'd love to know.
In the 90s and noughties, I stood for UKIP time and again. We were a pressure group before elections. If we saved a deposit, that was cause for an all-night party. I've had one serious attempt at standing for Parliament. And do you know what happened?
No.
You lost.
Do you know what happened? I'll tell you what happened. They cheated so badly that the agent got a 9-month prison sentence. All right? They massively overspent and cheated. I've stood once before. I know how difficult it is when you've got the big parties who treat the law with contempt. I didn't feel in 6 weeks from scratch I could do it. But I tell you what, I will be part of this campaign. I will be part of this debate. And I do think there are some very serious issues not being discussed.
You've had all year. You've had all year to think about this election.
I've had a TV show.
We all
Piers.
knew it was coming.
No,
we all
Piers.
knew it was coming.
Piers.
This idea you didn't have enough time
Piers,
to prepare.
I have a nightly TV show. Yours has been shut down, but mine's still going.
Oh, my God. OK, let's not go there.
If I may point out,
OK.
I came off old linear television.
You were sacked.
Because you're sitting
were
there
sacked.
with nobody watching,
You're a
losing tons
Okay.
of
You're
money.
a YouTuber.
OK, Piers and Nigel, much as you want to sort out your kind of TV rivalries, this is not the place to do it.
I'm on
'Cause
YouTube
actually,
now. I'm Justin
quite.
Bieber.
What we want to do is hear from the audience. Now, you asked a question back there about what Labour might do and whether Labour might introduce something similar. Wes?
So I was just
National service.
so confounded by that. Look, I think there is absolutely something in making sure that we provide more volunteering opportunities for young people, more positive activities for young people. Myself, Yvette Cooper, Bridget Phillipson have been working together on a programme called Young Futures, aimed at teenagers, to provide those sorts of opportunities, a bit like we did when we were last in government around early years. And so that's the level of ambition that we want, because especially for someone like me from a working class background, I think it's so important that you help young people to get those skills, get those experiences, build that confidence that doesn't just set them up for work, but sets them up for life.
All right.
And if that was the focus, then I'd be so much more open to it. But I don't think that's what it was. It was a £5 billion unfunded spending gimmick. £71 billion they've clocked up so far of unfunded spending commitments. That's more than Liz Truss's mini budget. It's like they've not learned anything.
OK, I'm going to take another question. But before I do, I just wanted to ask you, Damien, because this just happened before we came on air, that another Conservative MP has defected to Labour, Mark Logan. We've not heard a response from the Conservative Party. What is your response to that? That's another MP who's defected to Labour.
Well, look, each to their own. I mean, people make their own decisions. It's not a decision I would have made. You know, Mark has to think about whether...
It was a bit of a blow, isn't it?
I think he was standing down. I think he was standing down anyway. I don't know.
He's now saying he's going to join the Labour Party.
People make their own. OK, Wes will get another member. OK, people make their own decisions. What I'm focused on in this election is the big decision. It's the big decision between do you want Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party and no plan, or do you want Rishi Sunak, Conservative government, and a firm plan for the economy's already turning the corner, how we put it on a firm footing,
It's going really well,
and how we offer a brighter future to families throughout this country. That's what it's about, not about one individual.
Well, it's 3 individuals now, but anyway, OK. So I just want to let you know where we are next week, incidentally. So we will be in Chester in the northwest of England, and the week after that will be in Edinburgh. For Chester, we'll have Plaid Cymru and the Green Party on, as well as Conservatives and Labour, obviously. Now, I just want to say Chester, of course, is just over the border from Wales, so we'd also like to hear from people in Wales as well. So go to the Question Time website, follow the instructions there, and we'd love to see you in the audience. OK, our next question is from Dr. Nihar Maini.
Labour claims to reduce NHS waiting lists by extending working hours and asking doctors to work on the weekend. Where will you find the staff?
Now, given that I've called you doctor, I assume you're an NHS doctor?
Yeah, I'm a junior doctor.
So you're at the sharp end. What's your view? Can you find the extra hours?
No, to be honest, no. Like, with the amount of hours we do, we work more than 48-hour weeks a lot of the time anyway. I don't know how you'll find staff to cover weekend work, extended hours. Most of the junior doctors are leaving, to be honest. I'm an FY2, so as of next year, I either go into training or do a permanent role somewhere else. A lot of my friends who aren't going into training can't find jobs, or they've applied for training because of the bottleneck.
Yeah.
They can't get a job in training. So what are you going to do? Where are you going to find staff? Because most of us are leaving the NHS or leaving the country.
Or you're working all the hours God sends already. That's
Exactly.
the point you're making.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to do it, Wes?
So, first bit of reassurance, no doctor or NHS staff member will be compelled to do these evening and weekend shifts. These are 40,000 extra appointments we think we can provide every week through evening and weekend clinics using an approach that's been tried and tested in a number of places, including the hospital I can see out of my office window in Westminster, Guy's and St Thomas's. And what they did, they had a programme that paid staff overtime. Those who wanted to do it could opt in to do it. And they are doing, in one Saturday, more procedures than they would normally do in an entire week. So it's not just additional hours, it's also better ways of working. And my view is that that shouldn't just be available at a few hospitals in big cities. This should be available throughout the country, and that's why we've committed £1.1 billion to do that, alongside doubling the number of CT and MRI scanners, and not just more scanners, but AI-enabled scanners. We can start eating into the 1.6 million people who are waiting with anxiety for tests and scans.
But you say, Wes, but hang on a second, Wes, you're saying, look, we've done a pilot in a hospital near you, and we've seen that it works and that people have been prepared to work the extra hours. We've got a doctor right here who says, can't do it, I'm working too many hours as it is.
And that's OK, and I wouldn't want you or any of your colleagues to put in hours that burn you out and you can't do. But what I can tell you...
what makes you think you can replicate it around the country?
Because this isn't something I have made up. This is something I have seen working in action at Guy's and Tommy's, up in Leeds, at my local hospital in Goodmayes, and unlike lots of the hospital visits I do, where people are feeling utterly devastated by the state of the NHS, where clinicians feel totally frustrated and depressed because they can see the state of the conditions they're working in, their patients are being served in. The people who are delivering this service are beaming with professional pride because it's an improving service that can cut NHS waiting lists.
Did you want to come back in here?
At Guy's and St Thomas's, it might have worked. One, Guy's and St Thomas's is a massive tertiary hospital that has a lot of the NHS budget and is a lot of staff already. Also, they may have people wanting to do the extra hours, but do you consider that maybe people are doing the extra hours because they're not getting paid enough and they know they need more money, and also that they may not be within the working time directive? Because, I mean, as I'm sure you know, junior doctors, we're going back on strike very soon because of pay restoration. A lot of doctors I know are working outside of what we're actually allowed legally to work within the contract because they need money to put food on the table, to pay their rent, to look after their kids. And I just think that allowing for this to happen is just asking doctors to do that again without having the staff to fill the gaps.
Well, what I'd agree with you is we absolutely need to fix the fundamentals of the conditions that junior doctors are working in, actually wider NHS staff. And I'm absolutely appalled by the fact that junior doctors are now being forced out on strike again. And this health secretary has washed her hands saying, oh, we're in the election period now. I no longer have the power to deal with it. Well, what has she been doing since she was appointed? What was her predecessor doing? And it's not just about pay, that's important. It's also about the working conditions, the placements, the rotations, the basic disrespect that junior doctors have been treated with. And you have had plenty of time and plenty of health secretaries to sort this out. In the 2.5 years I've been Shadow Health Secretary, we've had 5 Conservative health secretaries.
Okay.
Maybe that chaos is part of the problem.
Let me put some of this to the person here from the government. Damien.
Thank you. So, no, of course you can't just ask already very hard-working clinical professionals to just work more hours. That isn't going to solve this problem. And everybody knows there is a problem, particularly after COVID, and you will have seen this. The backlogs grew, and they take time to shift.
Well, the backlog was big before COVID.
The backlog...
And just to remind...
Well,
so how would you sort this out
I'm coming on to that. Industrial action, of course, doesn't help either. It doesn't help to bring that backlog, bring it down any further forwards. We can't just ask people to work more hours. We need more people. And there are more doctors and nurses, a lot more, actually, than there were last time there was a change of government. 45,000 more doctors, 70,000 more nurses, but we're going to need more again. That's why we've got a long-term workforce plan for the first time to make sure that there are more training places going in for the professionals that we need. But you also need all the things that go with that. So that's why we have the programme of the Community Diagnostic Centre. And actually, I agree with Wes about the role of technology, and AI actually can help on things like speeding up diagnoses and reducing admin. But let's not turn this into a party political thing, because if we were going to do that... I bet
you don't want to debate the NHS. Rishi certainly doesn't. He's running from it the whole election campaign. He's not even mentioning the NHS.
Oh, just hang on, Wes. Because there is a comparison, a direct comparison you can all make within this United Kingdom, because health in England comes under the UK government, healthcare in Wales comes under the Labour government in Wales. And the fact of the matter is that Wales has the longest waiting lists in Britain and is the only administration in Britain to have cut NHS budgets, taking the NHS backwards in Wales.
When we were last in government, we did the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction in history. And we didn't have a UK crisis.
Hang on. Can I just say one thing? Can I just say one thing? This programme is only going to work if you let each other speak, you don't talk across each other, and we let the audience in. So let's try and do that, Piers.
My mother had a heart attack about 6 months ago, and it was obviously a very scary time for her, a very scary time for the family, but it gave me a real insight into the reality of what is going on in our hospitals. Because she was taken down in an ambulance at midnight to the south coast, and she was kept on a trolley in an A&E corridor for 7 hours without really any attention at all. But there were 35 other people out there in this corridor. This is modern-day Britain. It was absolutely shameful. And I got letters after I talked about this with Rishi Sunak in an interview from people who said their relatives had died in that same corridor after waiting 20 hours. So this has been a successive failure by successive governments for many years now. And the reality about the NHS is that when my mother got up to get treated, she got world-class treatment. We still have world-class doctors, world-class nurses, world-class staff. But the system to get into where they are is completely broken. And I think it's straightforward as to why. When the NHS was created, back in the late 40s, it was for a population of about 50 million people. We're heading towards a population of 70 million people. People are living at least 10 years longer than they were when the NHS got created. And we simply have not moved the system to cope with this enormous new-sized population, and it is creaking at the seams. And I'm sorry, Wes, but when it comes to your pledge, it is tinkering while Rome burns. And my question for you will be, given your Shadow Chancellor has just mimicked the Tories and said there'll be no tax rises, income tax, corporation tax, national insurance, now VAT, how the hell are you going to pay for this stuff? There will be no money.
OK, I will come back to you, Wes. Let me get round the audience. One here in the yellow top.
That's perfect, Piers. I was literally going to say that. So, Wes, you say you're going to fix the fundamentals of the NHS. What does that actually mean? What are you actually going to do?
I will come back to you, Wes, but I need to let other people in as well. Yes, one there, you've got a white top and a black cardi, I think, yeah.
Hi, so I'm a GP and I work over 50 hours a week. I'm also responsible for training over 50 GPs at St George's in Tooting, and I think you're really underestimating the level of distress in the system. I'm really tired of hearing about hospitals. 90% of patient contacts happen in general practice, and we receive less than 10% of funding. And GP contracts being imposed on us, you know, squeezing all the goodwill out of us is not going to fix the NHS. Yeah. Move the money. We don't need more money. We need it directed to general practice, and we need the respect back in general practice.
Woman in a coloured blue dress there, yes.
It's nice to say that we need more doctors, but the doctors also need supporting staff. They need nurses, they need technicians, they need radiographers, they need physios. I find just to say, oh, we need more doctors to work longer hours is very short-sighted. Come onto practice where we work. Walk with us throughout the day and see how we have to balance every single patient, every single procedure. It's very short-sighted to say, oh, we just need more doctors and they need to work longer. It's quite insulting, to be honest.
Nigel.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do agree with Piers. An exploding population is an issue, an ageing population is an issue. But, you know, we talk about individual aspects of the NHS and what's working and what's not. I worry we're not having a bigger think. I worry we're just talking about individual symptoms and not the cause of the problem. And Wes, you were really sounding quite radical 6 months ago about the NHS, but I sense a bit less so now. I think we've got to face up to something. It actually isn't working anymore. Because if you think about it, go back 6, 7 years, we were spending about 7% of our national cake on the NHS every year, all right? We're now spending over 10% of our national cake on the NHS every year. So we've increased in percentage, even regardless of population, we've increased in percentage terms enormously under this government what we're spending on the NHS. I think every one of us in the room, though...
It's actually about 18% of total spending is on health.
Sorry?
It's about 18% of total government spending is on health.
I think you'll find about that between 10 and 11, but we won't argue about it. We've increased massively the spending, and we're not getting the delivery. So why don't we think about a different funding model? A completely different funding model. The French have a mutual system where those that can afford pay effectively into an insurance scheme, those that can't afford it are covered, and they are getting a much better return whether we measure it on stroke, heart disease or cancer. We need to fundamentally rethink the way we fund and organise the NHS. It needs a big, big think.
Rose.
It is disturbing. It is quite disturbing to hear that we're only now just thinking about a workforce plan for the NHS. This should have happened a long, long time ago. I have used the NHS system. It's been good, but also I'm consciously aware that at a time when I went in wanting emergency treatment, I was told to come back the next day because there was no one operating the scans. That's ridiculous. People don't choose when to be ill. When they are ill, they need to be seen and attended to at that time. We've also got to stop taking people from abroad. You know, other countries pay...
You mean staff?
Yes, staff. Other countries pay to train their staff there, and then we take them and use them and don't value them. We've got to stop doing that.
Right.
Here in this country, we have stopped, we're asking nurses in particular to pay for their own training. This is a necessity. They ought to be able to be trained and equipped for, to look after those who are most vulnerable in our society. Actually, I thought that there was 350 million per week that was going to come into the health system.
There's been more.
What happened?
Rose, there's been more. There's been more than that.
What happened?
There's been more.
What happened?
More. Considerably more. Is the increase.
So again, we need people. Perhaps this is an area that it shouldn't just be, backwards and forwards seesawing with political parties, but that there ought to be a cross-party looking at the National Health Service and getting it right.
Okay. Wes, let me come back to you, because there's a number of questions there. First of all, where are you going to find the money? You heard that from Piers and also from the audience. And then you were talking about GPs, and I know you've talked about primary care.
Yeah, I feel very... So, it goes actually to the heart of your point about general practice and primary care. The way in which we spend what is just shy of £170 billion on our NHS is not being put to best use because we keep on pouring more and more money into hospitals at the expense of fixing the front door to the NHS in primary care. So even though GPs are providing around 1 million more appointments now than they did before the pandemic, there are thousands few of them. There are GPs who can't get jobs, despite the fact we are scrambling for 8 a.m. appointments. And we end up in an absurd situation where because someone can't get a GP appointment, which would cost the NHS 40 quid, they end up in A&E, which costs 400. And that is why I make the case over and over again that investment matters, of course it does. But our experience when we were last in government nationally told us that reform also matters. It's about how you spend the money. And to Nigel's challenge about the model of funding, I mean, I've looked at other OECD countries and how they do it. It's not about how it's paid for, it's about where the money goes. We underinvest on primary care, community services, mental health, social care, diagnostics. But hospital spending, we're either, like basically top of the table. And that is a real challenge. And I just say on this point of the model of funding, so I think this is we begin to hear these siren voices from Nigel, some of the commentators in the Telegraph and other newspapers. when I had kidney cancer in 2021, I had so many worries going through my mind. And the one thing I did not have to worry about was the bill. And I would rather die in a ditch than surrender that fundamental principle of equity that the NHS is a publicly funded public service, free at the point of use, and people should never, ever have to worry about the bill.
I'm going to move on.
I will never surrender that.
I'm going to take another question.
I'm sorry. I'm not suggesting we change that principle. What I'm suggesting is a more efficient way of spending the money. That's the point.
All right.
Otherwise, we're pouring in more and more money for less and less return, and that's been happening for years.
I'm going to take another question from Tom Pope.
Yes. Regardless of the people coming over on the small boats, illegal immigration is out of control. What's the solution?
Right, so net migration last year was its highest ever. It's come down slightly, 685,000 in 2023. Just for comparison, 2010, it was 252,000. Piers, what's the solution?
Why don't we have another referendum about Brexit? Because I seem to remember when 2016 came around that we were told that there was going to be control of our borders and it was going to be economically beneficial to this country. And 8 years later, we have lost complete control of our borders, both legal and illegal immigration. And economically, it seems to have been a willful act of self-harm. And one of the main architects of Brexit is sitting here, who could have run to stand as a member of Parliament in this election, but has chosen not to because he wants to go and help Donald Trump be elected in America. But I would like to ask Nigel Farage, what objection would you have, given that all the polls now say the majority of this country would actually vote the other way if there was another referendum, what objection would you have to just testing that theory and allowing the British people to decide whether they were sold a complete pack of nonsense?
What would be lovely, to get back to the question, why did people vote for Brexit? Well, there were lots of reasons. Getting back control of our lives was the main one, our democracy, governing ourselves, of which, sir, borders were the single most important part. You know, we'd gone from the late 1940s until 1997 with net migration of 30 to 40,000 a year over the course of 50 years. Labour opened the door in the most incredible way, and a net 2.7 million people came in during the Labour government. Under the Conservatives, that has just accelerated and continued. What about Brexit, Piers, was it gives us total control over who can come and live in our country.
We have no control.
Yes, we have.
That's the whole point.
No, we do have total control, but we have a government that have willfully got us to vote for them in 2019, and I helped them with that by standing aside in the general election, and they have willfully ignored the wishes of the people, betrayed Brexit voters. We now have 1.2 million people a year for the last 2 years settling in our country. I even dispute the numbers being down, Fiona, because they always get revised later.
Well, I even dispute the fact that no one here is answering the question. So let's get back to that. Just for a moment, Nigel, I'm going to interrupt you.
Use our Brexit powers. That's what we have to do to solve it. Use our Brexit powers.
And how would you fill many of those jobs that are being filled at the moment by people who are being invited over? 40-odd% of non-EU arrivals came on work-related visas.
We have big business in this country has an addiction to cheap labour. We've driven down wages for working people in this country. We've put in place an idea today to say that for employers, it would be cheaper for them to employ British people than foreign people, to try and encourage them to employ more British people. We've got millions of people of working age in Britain not working. We have to find a way of getting those people to work. But I tell you what, this addiction to cheap labour has actually made us as a country poorer, and it's worth remembering that. It's not working.
Rose.
Repeat the question, please.
The question. Regardless of people coming over in small boats, legal migration is also out of control. What is the solution?
This is another area that needs to stop being kicked around like a political football. It's not working. Our universities are very dependent on students coming over. Those students are charged significantly higher rates, and which subsidizes, I think, home students, those who are coming over for work in significant areas. I hear the point that Mr. Farage has just made. So instead of making this a political football, why don't we yet again sit down and ask questions, create a commission that is going to significantly make a change in this particular area? We talk about legal migration and we disassociate it from illegal migration. And I know in particular that there are some within this country, some within our political parties, and some even at this table that makes it a big deal. It ought not to be. We're talking about people who are most vulnerable. And those who come legally, I now hear us talking about, oh, they can't bring their family. What are we talking about? They're to stay without their families? So something needs to be done. I visited Calais recently and saw some of those most vulnerable people. I want us to ask questions about why are people leaving their countries? Why are they leaving their countries? Is it war? Is it to do with famine? Is it climate change? Is it, whatever the situation is? And how can we, as an international group, resolve this problem? If we don't address that at its root, people are going to keep moving. The British were economic migrants, and we forget that. When it moved all over the world, saying that it was conquering, they were economic migrants. So I want us to stop playing.
Bishop, this has to be political, and it has to be political because of the impact this issue is having on the lives of people in your church and all faiths.
I'm sorry, it is going to continue. No, let me finish. It is going to continue impacting on us unless we address it at its root. We cannot just throw people away. They are human beings. They are our brothers and sisters, and we are our brother's keeper.
I don't know whether you've ever been out into...
Okay, Nigel, I need to bring the audience in. Woman in the pink scarf.
Thank you. You're amazing. I work in higher education, and the threat to the graduate visa will absolutely decimate small and specialist organisations. So as one of the proposed answers to this question, I just wanted to say that we're quaking in our boots in higher education about the threat to the graduate visa, because our international students are the lifeblood of where I work.
OK, and the woman there in black top, I think, yeah.
If Labour get in, Keir Starmer has stated that he'll take away the charitable status of private schools, and the modelling around that means that about 20% of people will immediately leave the private school system. I'm just wondering where these children will go.
OK, we may come to that in a moment, but we'll stay on migration, if you'll forgive me, just for the time being. Yes, there's a man further back. Let's get a microphone to you. There you go.
On the Bishop's point of people fleeing, war-torn countries, climate change, I'm absolutely empathetic with that. But when they come to the UK, they're not coming from those countries, they're coming from France.
Yeah, which is a safe country. It's a safe country. And
Nigel, I've got to let other people... No, I have to let other people on the panel speak. I'm sorry, but that's just the way it works. Wes?
So, I think one of the things that's gone wrong with this debate, and it's right at the heart of what I think is wrong with a lot of politics in our country at the moment as well, is recognising an issue like immigration is actually really complicated and it's full of loads of nuance. International students don't just enrich our universities through their fees, they enrich the education because students from this country get to meet with people from a wide range of cultures and backgrounds, and those people often go back to their home countries and build successful lives in commerce, business, trade, diplomacy, politics.
Yes, but the Labour leader has said he wants to bring the number of illegal migration down. What's the solution? That's the question.
Yeah, I know, but Fiona, frankly, the interruption is part of the challenge because, you can't have a nuanced conversation about this without, but what are you going to do?
Well,
it's as simple as this, I think, if we're going to boil it down to simplicity then. So, in order to reduce net migration in this country, you have to invest in the skills of your own people. To Rose's point, I made an argument on this on the NHS the other week. I'm proud of the fact it's an international employer. I'm proud of people who've come around the world to build our NHS. I met a student just this week from Nigeria, and I think she's going to have a great career in the NHS. But we have become over-reliant on workers from overseas in our health and social care system. We cap university medical school places, so we turn away thousands of students from our own country with straight A's, and we do not give opportunities for people in our own country to get careers in medicine and health and care to the extent that we should. And when I said that the other week, instantly my inbox was full of people saying, I can't believe you're using divisive anti-migrant rhetoric about the NHS. And this is part of the challenge. Two things can be true simultaneously. It's great that we have an international NHS workforce. We are over-reliant on that international workforce. There are risks. We're recruiting from red list countries that have severe shortages. I agree with Rose, that is immoral. It is unethical to turn away straight A students in our own country. That is unfair. And when you've got a global shortage of healthcare workers, it's also short-sighted. You can't be sure that talent pool will be there in the long term. So on that point alone, I can help Yvette Cooper, if she's Home Secretary, reduce levels of net migration. On Rwanda, this is exactly where this race to the bottom gets us. Millions of pounds wasted on a scheme where not a single flight is taken off, and Rishi Sunak hasn't even got the decency to give him the £1,000 that is owed to Piers Morgan for the better. And I'd rather put that,
charity,
and I'd rather put that into a secure border command using counter-terrorism powers to smash the criminal gangs, because that's serious policy.
The question is about legal. The question is about legal migration.
Yeah.
Tom's saying it's out of control.
So the question is about legal migration. I hope we also will have a chance to come back to talk about those points that Wes just made.
What, the £1,000 that the Prime Minister owes Piers?
But this is...
Why isn't he paying it out of interest?
This question was... Just hang on. This question...
He's got it. He's definitely got the £1,000.
Still is the question the original member of the studio
He's richer than the king.
asked, which was about legal... Was about legal
He's basically
migration.
saying legal migration is out of control. Given that there were record numbers last year,
and there will always
do you disagree with that?
I am actually coming to that. So there will always be legal migration. The clue is in the term. So it's not a question of whether legal migration is good or bad. And we always want to welcome the brightest and the best who contribute to our economy. And we also, in a wider sense, we've always welcomed people and the way they contribute to the cultural life of the nation and to our society, but the numbers are too high, and that is the point for things like our public services, also for housing, and really at the heart of issues around housing is questions around supply and demand. So it has to be done in a managed way. Of course, we want international students, by the way, as the lady up there said, quite right, and I celebrate the success of our universities. But not necessarily we want people to bring in whole families, and that's why we've restricted what you can do in terms of bringing dependents, unless you're on a postgraduate course. Ditto on the health and care route. That is an important route, but we don't want it to be abused, and we think it's important that the companies operating there should be registered with the CQC. And to Nigel's point about wage competition, and it is a serious point, and many people feel it strongly, and they did in the Brexit referendum. We are increasing, as you will know, the earnings threshold in line with median pay in those types of jobs. And these things that the Prime Minister has put in place are having an effect, because visa applications are down by a significant amount year on year. But while we are still having bespoke and effective routes for the brightest and the best, for scientists, for researchers, for people in the arts, and so on. And that is what we need.
Unskilled labour. Come on, be honest.
And that is what we need. We need a
Be
balance.
honest with people.
We do want to welcome people here who will really contribute to this nation, but the numbers right now are too high, and there's a firm plan from Rishi Sunak to bring it down.
Can we just say one thing about the language? On the language. We haven't heard
such a plan from Wes or from
Can we all agree one thing, which is the language we use about migrants, legal or illegal? We need to be very careful how we talk about these people. Because Ben Habib, who is the deputy leader of Reform UK, said 1 month ago, when he was asked, you would leave them to drown, about turning people away from our coast in a boat. And he said, absolutely. And I found that utterly reprehensible, that anyone who is representing a political party in this country would think it's absolutely fine that these illegal migrants coming on our coast, we should be allowed to drown. That is not what this
Can we
country
get back
should
to
be
legal
about.
migration?
Well, hang on, no, hang on a minute.
Should be about.
Do you want to answer that question? I mean, I heard that interview.
The
That
point
is
of
what
stopping the boats.
hang on,
That's
is
what he
what
said.
Ben Habib
Well, I
said.
didn't hear him say that.
Do you denounce it?
If it is, well, of course. The point of stopping the boats.
Okay.
The point of stopping the boats is to stop the drowning. Thousands are drowning in the Mediterranean.
Okay, but your deputy leader
Thousands are
said
drowning.
if the worst came to the worst, you would have to let them drown,
well,
so as not to give in to their emotional blackmail. That's what he
It's a
said.
silly way to behave. Should we, in extremis, not accept the French Navy escorting boats over? Yes. But can we get back to legal migration? Because actually, important though the Dover situation is visually, the real issue is this. Because of the numbers that came in under Labour, because of the growing sense of frustration in this country, of the effect it has on the lives and the quality of life of ordinary people, you guys promised us in the 2010 manifesto, 2015 manifesto, 2017 manifesto, that net migration would be tens of thousands a year, right? In 2019, you won a massive majority from people who wanted lower numbers. So far, since you've been in power, net migration has been 4.3 million. It dwarfs even what happened during the Labour years. And I do genuinely believe this is the single most important question in the election. Do you know we have to build one new dwelling every 2 minutes in this country just to cope with the sheer increase in numbers?
This is not because of migrants.
It is, of course
it is not because of migrants. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Successive governments have failed to build houses.
How could
That's
they?
what it is.
How could they? If you don't have how many people coming.
Successive governments have failed to build houses. And what we do
How can you do it if you don't have
Hang on, let her speak, Nigel.
Let's blame the immigrants. Stop it.
Ludicrous.
All right.
You can't,
Okay, you've had your say. I'm going to move on.
unless you know how many
Okay.
people are coming, how do you
Nigel,
know how
you
many
have had your
houses to
say.
build?
And
It's
many more people
illogical.
are dying in France.
It's irrational.
You talk about France being a safe place. I visited a cemetery where there are people, those who have migrated there, who are dying there on that soil, in comparison to what we're talking about, people dying trying to cross the channel.
Okay.
So please don't tell me that that is a safe place.
I'm going to take one more question. We've only got about 7 minutes, but I'm going to try and fit it in because loads of you asked about this. Kieran Lee, there you are.
Is it morally right to impose a tax on parents' aspiration for their children?
So Labour pledged to remove tax exemptions for private schools. We are in one of those here. Adding the standard rate of 20% VAT to school fees and ending their business rate relief. Is it morally right, Wes?
Yeah, there are difficult choices to be made, and there isn't a great deal of money going around in the country. And since the Conservatives came to power, we've seen opportunities for young people narrow. We've seen school buildings literally falling in. We see the Prime Minister talking about maths to 18, perfectly reasonable thing to ask for. We can't even guarantee qualified maths teachers to teach kids to 16. And I know there's lots of opposition from independent schools who are now pleading poverty and saying that people are priced out. So I took the liberty of looking at this school's fees and how they've changed since 2020. They've gone up from £8,717 per term to £10,303 per term, an increase of 18%. School fees in this country, independent school fees, have risen well above inflation every year since before 2010. So I say respectfully, not to the parents. I know that parents are worried about this. I accept that. But I say to the head teachers of these sorts of schools pleading poverty, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to cut your cloth accordingly, like state schools have had to for more than 14 years. And we make no apology for putting the education and ambitions and opportunities of kids from working class backgrounds like mine, who attend the 93% of kids, above the schools that educate the 7%. Because we want to extend opportunity and aspiration and ambition, and that is not simply the preserve of the wealthy. And those are the sorts of fairer choices a Labour government would make unapologetically.
You're all going to have to be brief. We haven't got much time. Cheers.
Well, I think you should be apologetic. I think it's the worst kind of politics of envy. I think it is a war on aspiration. I like the way that question was phrased. And it shows a total lack of knowledge about the type of people who send their kids to schools like Epsom College. I bet there are a lot of parents here who have scrimped and saved to give their kids the best chance they can in life, as my parents did when I went to a prep school and then I went to comprehensive after that. And if you believe even half of the figures that have been projected as the impact of this, then what's going to happen is a lot of independent schools, not the big ones, who are going to be fine. It's not about the Eton colleges of the world. It's the smaller independent schools. They're going to go bust, and then hundreds of kids are going to need to go into the state school system, right? And that is going to swamp our system. They tried this in Greece in 2015. 23% VAT they put on independent schools. And exactly what is being feared now happened. Independent schools went under, teachers left or got fired because there was no work, and the state system got swamped.
Right.
And they reversed it. This is a politics of envy and Labour at its worst.
Damien.
Ironically, I think this might be Labour exercising some Brexit freedoms, because I think if we were still in the European Union, this probably wouldn't be possible. Across the world, it is a norm that you do not tax education. It would only possibly raise a small amount of money. You cannot know what the effect would be in terms of putting extra strain on the public sector schools, and it won't do the great sort of brilliant thing that you want to do symbolically to Eton and Winchester and Rugby. They will thrive. They'll survive as ever. But it will hit hard-working families. And I'm glad Wes raised the wider state sector, because we are also focused on the 93% of kids first and foremost. And the success story in education in this country is something of which we can all be very proud, with most schools now academies. The number of schools rated good or outstanding up from 68% when Labour were in government to 90% today. Going up the international league tables at secondary rather than down, as when they were in government, and our primary school readers now the best in the Western world. And that is something of which we can be proud, and our teachers have done the most amazing job.
Rose, we've only got 2 minutes, and I've got Nigel in this one.
Successive governments, if we're really serious about attending to this 93%, really needs to be asking questions about how can we resource all our schools so that all our schools are good, all our schools can have small sizes, all our teachers can be brilliant, because that's what we need. When we have all our schools equally brilliant, then people won't need to be stressing out to try and find a private school here, there and everywhere, but will go to their local schools.
Nigel.
It's not morally right to take away choice from parents and to take away the opportunity from some young people, the best possible education available to them. Actually, what I would do if I was Labour, I'd introduce more scholarships for people from working class backgrounds to go to some of the elite schools. I was at Dulwich College, 50% of my year were paid for by local authorities. People who were living, below the level.
And you know who got a bursary? You know who got a bursary? Who went to a school near here? Reigate Grammar. Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer did.
Keir Starmer.
He did. No, he did.
And they're saying now that as a result of this policy,
and guess who took
these
away?
bursaries and scholarships will have to stop. But Keir Starmer himself...
Don't do it at the same time.
Guess who took away the opportunity for those kids to go to my 400-year-old school? The Labour government in the 1970s. And we see this again and again and again. Labour seem to love to destroy things that are successful and work well. This will be a huge mistake if they do it. I hope they change their minds. I really do.
Wes, I'm sure you want to come back. I'm afraid our time is up, but you've made your point. Thank you to the panel.
We've got 5 more weeks of this, so don't
God. Thank you to the audience. I know loads of you wanted to hear about this, and loads of you had your hands up, so I'm really sorry I haven't come to you. That is it. Our hour is up, and yes, as you say, we've got 5 more weeks of this. It's going to be great. Thank you very much for watching from our panel, from our audience here. Bye-bye.